who must file income tax in Brazil in 2026. A complete guide for foreigners. So my name is Iure, I'm a Brazilian lawyer, and I've been working for international clients for the last 20 years. If you live in Brazil as a foreigner, you may be asking yourself a very simple question. Do I need to file an income tax return this year in Brazil? This answer depends on your tax residency status and on whether you meet at least one of a legal filing criteria during 2025. So, in Brazil, the Federal Tax Service, the Receita Federal, issue clear rules through a Brazilian normative structure, and these rules govern the 2020 annual income tax return for the 2025 calendar year. Okay? So, in this video, I will explain you who must file, what the deadline is, and what the foreigners in Brazil need to pay special attention to. So, let's start with the deadline. The filing period runs from March 23 to May 29 in this year, 2026. So pay attention. If you missed this deadline, penalty may apply. So the minimum penalty starts at R$165.74. And if tax is due, the fine may also include 1% per month up to legal cap. Okay, so think about and don't forget this deadline. Now, the key question, who is required to file? If you were a tax resident in Brazil during 2025 and you meet at one of legal criteria, then you must file a tax return. Let's go to the main situation. First, tax income. If you receive taxable income above of 35,584 reais during 2025, you must file this income tax return. That's include salary, wage, bonuses, freelance income, self-employment income, pension, retirement, benefits. So even if you receive abroad, you need to pay a Brazilian income tax in Brazil. So even if you receive a salary wage abroad, you need to pay in Brazil this income tax, and this amount included the benefits and salary received abroad. Okay? Second, even if your income was tax exempt, not taxable, or taxed exclusively at CERT, you may still have to file. But in this case, if this type of income exceed 200,000 reais in 2025, filing is also mandatory. Okay? Third situation, capital gains. If you sold real estate, vehicle, stocks, or other assets, and there was a taxable capital gain, you must file regardless of the income. So you need to file even you receive a little income. Okay. Fourth, stock exchange transactions. If you trade, but now it's in Brazil perspective, okay? If you trade in stock market in Brazil, commodities market, future market, or similar financial market, filing becomes mandatory in two common situations. So one situation, if the total amount of the transaction exceed 40,000 reais in a year, you need to file. Or if you had any taxable net gain, even if the total volume was lower than 40,000 reais. If you have a gain, you need to file. First, rural activity. if you had gross revenue from rural activity above of 177,920 reais, you must file. Also, if you want to offset rural losses, filing is required. Okay. 6, assets and rights. If on December 31, 2025, the total volume of your assets and rights was above of 800,000 reais, is necessary to file. Okay, that includes different kind of assets that you have: real estate, vehicles, bank account, investments, and other relevant assets, even if these assets are placed abroad. Okay, so you need to count if you have bank account in US, Portugal, France. Is necessary to count if you have more than 100,000 reais, is necessary to file a Brazilian tax return. Okay. 7, situation. Crypto. Brazil now has a strict monitoring of digital assets. If you held or trade crypto, pay close attention. You may be required to file if you, pay attention, have the cryptocurrency assets above 25,000 reais at any point of 2025, or you made a crypto transactions above 30,000 reais, or you realized taxable gains from those operations. Okay. 8, situation. Foreign assets and offshore structure. I think this is the most relevant topic for foreigners living in Brazil. Under law 14754 of 2023, enacted in that year, filing is required in several cases involving foreign assets or foreign entities. If you have a bank account abroad, placed abroad, if you have a foreign investment, financial investments, if you receive interest in controlled foreign companies, or a trust or deposit held abroad, is necessary to file a Brazilian tax return, even if those assets did not generate much income. Okay, so it's necessary to report in Brazil. 9, real estate exemptions. You have in Brazil some exemptions to reduce the tax burden when you have a real estate. Okay, so if you sold a real estate property and you claim for tax exemptions, in this case you need to file a Brazilian tax return. 10, really important to think this point. New resident in Brazil. If you become a Brazilian tax resident during 2025, and you may also fall under filing requirements. So what's mean? In general terms, a person becomes a tax resident in Brazil if they stay in Brazil for more than 183 days within a 20 period of months. Okay, if you enter in Brazil a visa, a permanent visa, become a tax resident, or if you arrive in Brazil with a visa, a labor visa, for example, you become a tax resident in Brazil in 2025. So in this case, or those cases, it's necessary to file a annual income tax return in Brazil. If you arrive in Brazil with a permanent visa, become at the same time a Brazilian tax resident in Brazil. Okay, so if you become in 2025 a Brazilian tax resident, it's necessary to file this annual tax return. Okay, so this concept, the tax residency, is really important. Even if you don't have money, if you don't have assets, you didn't get a gain, it's necessary to file because you become a tax resident in Brazil. Okay, your tax residency status give you or became you someone who needs to file a tax return in Brazil. Another point, in Brazil, what establish your tax obligation is not your citizenship, it's your tax residency status. So if you are not Brazilian, once you become a Brazilian tax resident, Brazil may tax you your worldwide income. So in worldwide income basis, that means that you need to report your salary from a foreign employer, okay? Real estate income from property placed abroad, investments return from account outside Brazil, or you receive, for example, dividends from your international company, you need to pay income tax in Brazil according to those revenue. Okay, this is where many foreigners make a mistake, because in Brazil works a worldwide income status. A very common mistake is assume that because they comes from another country, Brazil does not need to know about, but it's really incorrect. So now let's talk about how to file. There are two main methods. The first is online system called Meu Imposto de Renda. It's something new, okay? This is cloud-based filing portal offered by Receita Federal. The second way is download. You download in your computer, okay? The program named Programa Gerador da Declaração, PGD. Those methods are available in Portuguese, which can be a challenge for foreigners because it's not possible or don't have this translation in English, okay? That is why many expatriates and foreign residents choose to work with Brazilian attorney. For example, the Brazilian attorney familiar with international situation. So it's why it's important to ask a help. To access this filing system, you usually need a gov.br. So to access the filing system, in this case, when you, if you download the program, you don't need to have a key or password. You need to file your information and then you send a declaration, okay? But sometimes after that, you need to see if all your information, the tax informations are correct. It's possible to go to your tax information before a Brazilian tax administration, Receita Federal. So in that case, you need to have a code to register a PIN code and go to have this access of your tax information. Now, let's move to deductions. Brazil generally allows two approaches. Okay, the first is the simplified deductions. This is a flat deductions. Okay, so something flat of equivalent to 20% of your taxable income, subject to a legal cap. This option is often useful for foreigners because it's a sample and does not depends on organizing many receipts and local expense records. The second option, so it's possible to deduct your medical expense, healthcare expense, education, and certain limit expense, social security, dependent deductions of your family, your children, okay? So alimony payments, for example, it's possible to deduct, okay? So if you choose this kind of deduction, you need to have some documentation, because Receita Federal can ask this information. So first, of course, you inform online this operation, this deduction, but if tax administration has some doubt about this information, can call you and apply you to show this documentation. So if you decide to use this kind of deduction, you need to take care and have information and documentation about these documents, okay? Now, regarding the tax rate, Brazil follows a progressive income tax system. The tax burden increases depending on income level. So, in addition, starting with 2026 filing cycle, there is a special attention for high-income individuals. People with very high annual income may be subject to a minimum individual income tax calculation. Okay, depends on their total earning and the legal framework applicable to them. But you'll be for 2026, okay? Because this, when you talk about Brazilian tax return, you need to do now. We talk about 2025, okay? Tax burden is increase, depends of your revenue, but it's stop to 27.5% of the income is the maximum rate that Brazil income taxes. Now, let's hide some special situation for foreigners. First, Carnê-Leão. Think about Carnê-Leão is the system of payment. If you receive income without a Brazilian tax, withholding tax, such as for an employer, you receive a salary remuneration of your company placed abroad, you need, or you receive a rent of your property placed abroad, is necessary to pay to make a monthly tax calculation using a Carnê-Leão system. So every month you receive income from abroad, you need to pay tax in Brazil. Okay. Many foreigners only discover this obligation when prepare the annual tax return, because when you talk about your income 2025, you need to receive, for example, a rent, a salary last year. You need to calculate every month how much you receive. So in this, sometimes you understand that it's necessary to calculate just now, you know. So you need to pay fine because you didn't pay your tax in this specific period, because it's monthly basis, okay? But in some case, you have some foreign tax credit. If you pay, because sometimes you pay already tax in your country and you need to pay again in Brazil. Depends if Brazil have a tax agreement, if your country, it's possible to deduct the payment that you did abroad to reduce the tax burden in Brazil. So it is possible to do that. But think about to require property and solid analysis of the documentation. In another point, if you have a financial income placed abroad, it's necessary to pay now. It's not pay in 2025. You need to pay now your interest, dividends receive the last 2025. Pay now, because if it's considered as a financial income, you need to pay now. It's changed the law, because in the past it was to pay in monthly basis. But now it's necessary, and the period of payment must be now during the preparation of your tax return. So, okay, now let's look at the most common mistake foreigners make. Number one, think that being on tourist status or no Brazilian passport automatically avoid tax residency. That's not how Brazilian tax law works. Think about that. Number two, failing to report foreign income. Number three, ignoring crypto assets. Number four, forgetting to disclose foreign account, offshore assets, or foreign currency holdings. And number five, filing late or not filing at all, because no one explained the rules in a clear way. Unfortunately, lack of knowledge usually does not prevent penalty. And speaking with penalty, late filing can trigger a monthly fine, a minimal penalty, and even no taxes due, and potential much more serious consequence in the case of omission or intentional concealment. So don't forget that, because you have in Brazil a penalty is a 75% of the tax that you need to pay. So if you pay incorrectly and the Brazilian tax administration found, or you pay less and the tax administration found this difference, they will pay you, they will file a 75% of fine linked with your tax income. So here are the main takeaways. Tax residency, not citizenship, determines whether what you may need to file. Meeting just one legal criterion may already trigger the obligation. If you are Brazilian tax resident, your worldwide income may need to be reported. Don't forget, the deadline for 2026 fine cycle is May 29 of this year, so May 29. Crypto assets, foreign accounts, offshore investments, and controlled foreign structures require a special care, okay? Because there are a special system of payment, some deductions, some credit, so need to think about and look and try to get the help for someone who knows Brazilian tax rules. Okay. So to conclude, understand your Brazilian tax obligation as a foreigner is essential. The legal rules may be clear on paper, but applying them to a real life situation often require a careful review. If you are unsure whatever you need to file, do not wait until the last minute. Try to call, try to be in contact with someone, a professional, accountant, a tax lawyer, to help you to file correctly and properly your tax return. So filing correctly and on time is not just about avoiding a penalty. It's about protecting your legal and financial position in Brazil. And in many cases, if it is also about protecting your ability to work, to invest, to do business and live in Brazil with security. So it's at the end. Thank you very much. Thanks for your watching. If you want to receive more information about Brazilian system, follow our channel. Okay? See you in the next video. Bye.